It was a strange sight to see a man so well-dressed sleep on a dusty mat, under the open sky. Everyone knew him as Easy, the poor but hardworking man who lived just beyond the village. He didn't have much, a small clay hut with a thatched roof, a few goats, and a plot of land he barely tended. Yet, whenever he came to the market, his eyes were kind, and his hands were always helping those who needed it. Even though he seemed to struggle, he never asked for help. One day, a beautiful woman named Adanna came to the village. She was a widow who had once married into a rich family in the next town. But with her husband gone, she had decided to return to her roots. Many men tried to catch her eye, including Easy. Unlike the others, Easy didn't seem like he wanted anything from her. He was just there. Quiet, humble, with an air of peace around him. As weeks passed, they started talking more. Adanna noticed how he never boasted or pretended to be someone he wasn't. He shared stories of his childhood, his dreams, and even his hardships. They began to share meals, laugh, and talk until the sun went down. And I, being a close friend of Adanna, watched it all happen, wondering why a woman like her would choose a man with so little. One evening, just before a festival, Easy invited Adanna and a few of us to his home. It was a humble place, but he had gone out of his way to cook a fine meal. As we sat around the fire, he shared a story, a simple one about family and love, which touched Adanna deeply. And just like that, in the quiet of that night, I saw how she started to fall in love with him. Then came the strange turn. A few weeks later, while I was out on an errand, I passed through a village far from our own. And there, I saw Easy again. But he wasn't wearing his old, patched clothes. No. He was dressed in the finest robes, gold rings on his fingers, and he spoke with a proud tone as people addressed him as a chief. I could hardly believe it. Here was Easy, not the poor man we all knew, but a wealthy chief who lived in a grand house. He even had servants. And I overheard enough to know that he was visiting there for family matters but lived comfortably in another village. My heart pounded as I realized what this meant. Easy had been pretending to be poor, hiding his wealth to find someone who loved him for who he was, not what he had. I rushed back to tell Adanna. At first, she didn't believe me, but eventually, we both went to confront him. When we asked Easy why he had done it, he sighed and said, "In my world, people come to me only because of my wealth. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for what I own. I wanted someone who saw me, not my riches." Adanna was silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "But why didn't you tell me?" He answered, "I was afraid that once you knew, you would see me differently." It took her time, but eventually, Adanna forgave him. She saw that his intentions, though strange, had been sincere. And as for me, I learned that day that true love indeed looks past wealth, titles, and pride.